Well, we're officially more than halfway through Season 8 of Game of Thrones. A lot of controversy on that last episode. Now we have, I guess, a little bit more of a stable episode, the last of the Starks. Let's review this. What is up, guys? It's time for another Game of Thrones episode review. Yes, my forehead is sunburned. I was at Rockville this weekend rocking my face off. And I'm not a good boy because I forgot to take my sunblock and I got some sunburn on my forehead. So it's kind of embarrassing, but I'm going to roll with it. But if you haven't checked out that video, definitely do so. I got to run into my good buddy Cody Leach and his father in that video, which was really cool. But we're gonna talk about Game of Thrones. Like I said, I'm going to review every episode in this season. I don't do a lot of TV material, but Game of Thrones is such a big show. This is the final season, and I want to discuss every episode. Now, first off, that last episode, there was a lot of controversy around that episode, and I think rightfully so. It was a really dark episode. I think when you're a cinematographer, you have to find that fine line of making the scene as realistic as possible, but also satisfying your audience. In this case, making sure they see what's on the screen. I have a 4K high dynamic range television. I watched it at night. So while I was watching this episode, I didn't really have any problems with it. I wasn't thinking, this is way too dark, because I could see everything. And I was in the scene. I knew that this whole thing was taking place at night. So yeah, outside of it being a little bit too dark, I didn't have a problem with Arya Stark taking out the Night King. I loved it. I thought she was built up to that point. That's character building, and her character was built over quite a few seasons. So why everybody was up in arms about this, saying that why is the Night King taken out so easily? You know what? Sometimes that's just the way it is. I know, as shallow as that excuse is. Look at Achilles, for example. Achilles was built up as the most dangerous guy on the planet in that story. And he was taken out with an arrow through his Achilles heel. So sometimes that stuff happens. Arya was trained as kind of this invisible assassin, pretty much, the many-faced god. And so it wasn't that surprising after the dust settled that she was the one that took out the Night King. I thought it was highly satisfying, actually. I was kind of getting tired of Jon Snow doing everything. But now we're going to talk about this episode. The beginning of this episode is really kind of mourning for all the deaths that happened in the last episode. Now there was two major deaths too as well, Jorah and Theon. To me, that counts for something. I know you guys are wanting like everybody and their brother to die in this show, but if you think back, there are some shocking deaths in Game of Thrones, but they're definitely spread out quite a bit. You had two big deaths in this episode. They're not going to kill freaking Arya and Sansa and Jon Snow. Jon Snow pretty much has plot armor now because he died once and it was brought back to life. So when you do that to a character, you don't kill him again unless it's like the very last episode. So you know he's not going to die. But Theon is a character that has a huge arc. This is a guy that started off kind of an immature dick, and then, no pun intended, he had his dick taken from him, and then he comes full circle. He finally finds his way back to the Starks, finds his true path, and he dies in a heroic way, trying to protect Winterfell. So I think that death really shook me a lot, because I like Theon Greyjoy. I like his arc. Jorah is another very emotional death. This is a guy who was friend-zoned pretty much from the second he met Dany. And she even admits in this episode that she knew that he loved him, but she could never love him back. So he's even friend-zoned after death, poor guy. But I liked Jorah as a character, He was a guy that would put it all on the line, basically because he was in love. But what I found so interesting about the beginning of this episode, too, was Dany's place in this whole thing now, because she's really earned her position up to this point. Everybody pretty much worshipped her because she was a great leader. And then when she gets to Winterfell, nobody respects her. Even at the beginning, you see everybody praising Jon Snow, Tormund praising Jon Snow. And you see the effect that has on Dany. Her face, she's like really sad about the whole thing. Because, when you work so hard as she's done to get to a certain place and then to not be respected at the end of it, it's pretty sad. So she's kind of going on tilt now in this episode, which makes it interesting because what's going to happen to her in this episode? You know, going to that last scene in this episode where Cersei has maintained her evil bitchiness throughout this whole thing. She gets worse and worse, but in the best way. And she is a true, formidable foe by the end of this thing. You know, she is so focused on vengeance. She's not really clouded. She has one goal and one goal in mind. She wants to rule the Seven Kingdoms, and she wants to kill Dany at all costs. So you could see the rage between these two females at the end of this episode. But Dany and Cersei have completely different mental mindsets. You know, Dany is broken down. You know, she lacks self-confidence, whereas Cersei is the opposite of that. She's determined and demented. So I like that dichotomy between these two leaders. Also, we say some goodbyes in this episode. Tormund says his goodbyes. Ghost doesn't even get a pat on the butt from Jon Snow. And also Sam, who I think should have died in the last episode, actually. I don't know why they didn't kill Sam, because if you don't kill him, and then the next episode he's just going to go back, you know, to the Tully homeland, what's the point? But Sansa Stark, I'm falling in love with this woman, because this is a character that I found her interesting, but I wasn't like Team Sansa up until season 8. And now all of a sudden, she is really this powerful woman. And I love that scene where she's actually talking to Tyrion, and she tells him that everything that she's went through has made her who she is. If she didn't have that atrocity with Ramsay Bolton, if she wasn't married to Joffrey, then she wouldn't be who she was. You know, she wouldn't be the strong Sansa that she turned out to be. And so I really love who she is now. She's, I guess, kind of like Cersei. She's very strong. She's also very battle-oriented. We remember in the last episode where she was trying to tell Jon Snow, you can't defeat Ramsay Bolton. He's always 2 steps ahead of you. Now she's giving battle plans in this episode to Daenerys. And Daenerys is going to have a major problem with that because she doesn't really like Sansa. You know, everything is like a power play with Dany. And she doesn't do it in the smartest way. She uses her emotions. And you shouldn't let your emotions get in the way when it comes to strategy. So I love that about this episode. You have all these different pieces in play. Not only from a strategic standpoint, but also from an emotional standpoint. Now, one strategic move she does do is she makes Gendry Lord Gendry Baratheon. She gives him his last name back, his rightful name, and she makes him the ruler of Storm's End. And that was a complete strategic move. But, I mean, is it enough? Not really. But then Gendry goes to Arya, and he asks Arya if she will be his wife. And we all know how that was going to turn out. You know, Arya always had the hots for Gendry. Nice little booty call in the last couple episodes ago. But you knew that she was going to say, that's just not me. I am not that type of person. And so she doesn't do it. She turns him down. Which brings up a good point. Arya is one of the youngest characters in the show. So after the 6th episode, if Arya is still alive, could they continue more tales of Arya Stark? I would definitely watch that. I'd be all over it. Now, another character that I really love in this show is Bronn. You know, we've seen him with Tyrion, we've seen him with Jaime. He has literally become a meme on the internet now because of his certain liking to the ladies. And I love the character. And this episode, you know, he's still Bronn, and he even punches Tyrion. And everything's about a power play for him. And in order for him to fight for Jaime and Tyrion, then he wants to be made a knight. So I'm curious to see what they do with Bronn in these last couple episodes. Is he going to have like this really awesome moment? Because I love the character. He's so fun. And he really is like the comic relief that we need in this show. Now, one of the big things about this episode that I'm being honest, a lot of you guys are going to disagree on this, but I didn't see this coming. With Jaime getting it on with Brienne of Tarth. I just never saw them that way. I always saw them as like just more of a friendship. I knew she had the hots for him. I could see that. But I never dared think that Jaime was gonna, you know, I guess return the favor. But he does. And, you know, I don't know if he's in love with Brienne, but that was just strange to me. I didn't see that coming. It's hard for me to buy their chemistry together. And what does that really do here on out? Towards the end of the show, like how does that fit into what's going on? Why is it important? I have questions. But the big thing that I gotta talk about is that last scene. Didn't see this coming, you know. Dany's just flying her dragon, broad daylight with both her dragons. And then just freaking broad daylight out of the blue, Rhaegal gets shot with an arrow, with a couple arrows, and just goes down. I mean, he's killed just like that in Game of Thrones fashion. So how's that for a shocking death? I think because of Dany's emotional state, she can't think strategically, and just flying out in the middle of nowhere, and the fact that Rhaegal gets killed, I think that's kind of her fault. You know, I don't think she has her battle mind about her, and Euron, he's going to take advantage of that, and that's what he does. Euron is like the ultimate dick. Really, he's kind of whipped, because he'll do anything to please Cersei. And Cersei doesn't give two craps, but Cersei is pregnant with Euron's baby. But she doesn't care about Euron. We can see that. All she wants is power, and it's fueled by vengeance, you know? It's fueled by hatred. That's what's interesting about Cersei. She kind of reminds me of like the Sith in the dark side, and how hatred just fuels that fire. Cersei is a great character. She really is. And I'm glad that she is the ultimate villain at the end of the show and not the White Walkers. But then that last scene, you know, she has a power play. She's got Missandei, who is like a loyal servant of Dany. And Cersei tells Dany, if you don't surrender, then I will kill Missandei, I'll cut her head off, and we will go to war. And of course, that's what she does. And we all saw that coming a mile away. I mean, Missandei's a good character, but in the last act of this board game, yeah, she's gone. But guys, this was a damn good episode, actually. I liked it. There was a lot going on, I think. It started off kind of more of character-based, strategic-based, and then you got that nice little surprise there at the end with Rhaegal getting killed. So some good stuff in this episode, actually. 2 episodes left. Really curious to see how this fight between Cersei and Dany goes. And I forgot to mention the secret's out. Dany begged Jon Snow to not tell who he was to his sisters. And of course he did. And then that secret got out. And then you got Varys telling Tyrion that if we know, probably 100 people know by now, which he's right. If you thought respect was gone for Dany at the beginning of this episode, just imagine by the next episode. Dany is not the person she used to be. So anyway, guys, that's my recap for Game of Thrones Last of the Stark, episode 4. What are your thoughts on this episode? Post down below in the comments. What do you think is going to happen with Dany by the end of this thing? I'm curious. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.